Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Peters. This is the Poisoned Pen in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it's our pleasure today to welcome back Barrett Tillman, who is a local author in some senses because he lives in Mesa, Arizona. It's all one big megalopolis, but he's actually from Oregon. And here's a few interesting things about Barrett by way of introduction. He was first published at the age of 15. He's written 45 books or possibly more, but the figure that really blows me away is 600 magazine articles. Wow. What do you do, write in your sleep?
I've been told that I laugh in my sleep, so writing would probably fit in as well.
Awesome. In any case, his works of fiction include collaborations with best-selling authors Harold Coyle and Stephen Kuntz. And he's won a whole string of awards, and probably the most relevant for today is in 2009, he won the U.S. Naval Institute General Prize, but he's won awards from the Air Force for historical writing, the North American Society for Oceanographic History. That sounded pretty cool. Anyway, he grew up dreaming to become an aviator, but since I already mentioned eyesight, his eyesight did him in. So instead, he was derailed from that, and he has done the next best thing, he says, writing all these wonderful books about airborne warfare and related topics. His latest subject, the legendary World War II aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, was inspired, I guess, in part by a landmark book by retired author Edward Stafford, who wrote The Big E, the story of the USS Enterprise in 1962. And Barrett's article in the Arizona Republic, the interview that he did, went on to say that surely the world needs a landmark book about the Enterprise every 50 years. So my question is, why? What would have happened between 1962 and now that would make it worthwhile to come back and do another landmark book about the Enterprise? All yours.
Odd that you should mention it. This is the inspiration for my abiding interest in Enterprise CV6. This Dell paperback was published in 1964, and you can do the math if you're so inclined, but that was the summer after my freshman year in high school. And during a cross-country train journey, I read most of this book, and I was enthralled for two reasons. Number one was the exceptional quality of the writing. Ed Stafford was just a wonderful author, and he's still with us. He's about 93 or 94, retired in Florida. And as he aptly describes, Enterprise was absolutely essential to the way the United States was able to pursue the Pacific War in the year after Pearl Harbor. Shortly after the end of the Guadalcanal campaign, which was early 1943, a correspondent named Eugene Burns wrote a very good contemporary book called Then There Was One. And that title referred to the fact that at the height of the Guadalcanal campaign, which was the most closely fought air-sea land campaign in the Pacific War, only Enterprise remained afloat of our six carriers that had combat in the Pacific in 1942. The only other survivor was USS Saratoga, which sustained heavy battle damage on two occasions and therefore missed almost the entirety of that year. So, considering that Ed Stafford wrote a 200,000-word book about the Enterprise, what is it that here 50 years later warrants another one? And I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, Stafford's book is superb on the aviation aspects of the various units, the squadrons and the air groups that rotated through Enterprise during the entire war. But he's told me in a couple of emails that he wished he had been able to write a longer book, and it took him 5 years to write this one, that would include more of the ship's company, what the Navy calls white hats, the sailors, and between them and the commissioned officers, the chief petty officers, who really made the ship work. And consequently, I wanted to devote a good portion of my book to the enlisted and non-commissioned people who were so instrumental in Enterprise's success. The other aspect is advancing scholarship. Apart from the fact that my book includes the design and construction of Enterprise, we also are in a situation where in 1962, relatively little information was available from the Japanese side, and that certainly changed. I'm going to say going back a good 15 to 20 years, the Japanese Defense Ministry has published a massive compilation of wartime reports from their Army, Navy, and Air Force, not all of whom, in fact, only a small part of which have been translated yet. But over those recent decades, so much more information has come about. For instance, in Ed Stafford's book, you'll read in one of the last chapters, it's called Tomizai, Tomizai. That was thought to be the name of the kamikaze pilot who dived into the Enterprise's forward elevator on May 14th, 1945, and inflicted such damage that the ship was knocked out of combat for the rest of the war. Well, we now know, based on research here and in Japan, that actually his name was Tomiyasu Shunsuke. And one of the things that most intrigues me about writing history is that you never know what's coming at you from around the corner, or in this case, in the mail. A little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I opened an envelope in the mail with handwriting I did not recognize, and inside was another envelope, and it said, "Thought you might like to have this." I opened it up, and there was another piece of paper that said, "From the pocket of Tomizai, 14 May, 1945, and it was a 50-sen paper note in almost pristine condition. It had been folded in half, but whoever had acquired it had fortunately kept it fully extended without additional creases, and had kept it in the dark for all those years. And as a result of that specific instance, I resolved to find out more about Lieutenant J.G. Shunsuke Tomiyasu. And thanks to a colleague in Japan who was a cadet, a midshipman I should say, at the Japanese Naval Academy in 1945, I am now in touch with the deceased kamikaze pilot's brother in Japan, and his family is so proud to know that the Enterprise Association recognizes the valor that that young man, a 22-year-old Zero pilot, demonstrated as a dedicated enemy of USS Enterprise. So you have former enemies who now have come together, and in fact, Enterprise crew members who had picked up souvenirs, mainly pieces of the airplane, and kept them, now have returned some of those artifacts to the family in Japan. So it adds a whole new dimension. Additionally, I enjoy some advantages that Commander Stafford did not, because there's been a considerable amount of secondary material published since 1962. Some of my colleagues, such as John Lundstrom, who wrote a wonderful 2-volume study of naval air combat in the Pacific after Pearl Harbor, Richard Frank, the preeminent historian of the Guadalcanal campaign, John Parshall and Tony Tully, who did a landmark book several years ago called Shattered Sword, giving a brand new perspective on the Battle of Midway. All of those contain additional material that was not readily available. In fact, in some cases did not exist in the early 1960s. So that's sort of the long way around the block to say that the continuing